Hey there. Could you please explain to the class what the Kyoto Protocol requires?
Sure. According to our research, the Kyoto Protocol is made up of binding targets and mechanisms to help achieve those targets. It also has binding provisions in the case of non-compliance of countries not achieving their targets. Take a look at this video. It explains what the targets of the protocol are.
The industrialized countries of Annex I must reduce their total emissions since 1990 by at least 5%. However, developing countries or non-Annex I countries have no limits applied to them. Any Annex I country that exceeds its limit will be required to make up the difference between its emissions and its assigned amount during the second commitment period, plus an additional deduction of 30%.
Now that we know the targets, could you please explain the Kyoto Protocol's mechanisms?
Certainly. Watch these two videos. The first explains the clean development mechanism. The second explains emission trading.
The Clean Development Mechanism allows a country that does not meet its target under the Kyoto Protocol to implement an emission reduction project in developing countries. Such projects can earn saleable Certified Emission Reduction or CER credits, each equivalent to 1 ton of CO2, which can be counted towards meeting Kyoto targets. This mechanism encourages investments in renewable sources of energy in developing countries.
What is a carbon unit? A carbon unit is a permit to emit 1 ton of CO2. This is equal to the emissions of a one-way flight from Oslo to Bangkok for one person, or 5 months of driving by an average Norwegian motorist. So how does the emission trading scheme actually work? The emission trading scheme determines how much CO2 and other greenhouse gases we can emit. In 1997, most of the countries in the world signed the Kyoto Protocol. UN distributes quotas of carbon units to those industrialized countries that have signed the treaty. These units set a limit on the level of emissions. This limit is equivalent to the total amount of CO2 that these countries are permitted to emit, and which is less than the anticipated emissions. Some countries are so successful in reducing their emissions that they simply don't need all the carbon units they've been allocated, while other countries may struggle to reduce their emissions and need more units. Countries may, therefore, buy and sell carbon units. The price of tradable units depends on how many there are in circulation. Similar to a stock exchange, prices vary according to supply and demand. Each country is individually responsible for deciding how to cut its emissions. Heavy industry is often responsible for a large share of a country's CO2 emissions. Many countries have therefore decided that these industries must make the largest contribution towards emission reductions. Let's look at an example. Factory A and B have both been allocated carbon units by their authorities. Factory A decides to reduce its emissions by implementing climate-friendly measures. Their reduction efforts are in fact so successful that they have carbon units to spare. These can then be sold. Factory B, on the other hand, is unable to reduce its emissions and has to buy carbon units, from Factory A, for instance. However, Factory B can also cover its emissions by investing in CO2 reducing measures in Factory C, which is located in a developing country. Although this country does not have any obligations under the Kyoto Protocol, the UN can still approve the emission reductions and give Factory B carbon units equivalent to the reductions in Factory C. So, regardless of whether Factory B buys units from Factory A or C, the result is reduced emissions.
Oh, I see. But are these transactions recorded?
Yes. In fact, failure to report them is a violation.
All annual emission reports should be stated in terms of tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. All transactions should be reported by country and year of origin within 24 hours. Failure to do this automatically will place a party in non-compliance. The party may not undertake any further transfers until the reporting violation is cured.
A party may not undertake any further transfers until the reporting violation is cured. Also, if a party's actual net emissions exceed 120% of total emissions for the entire period, then the party is prohibited from making any transaction.
Well, thank you for all your help. Now we have a better understanding of how the protocol works.
My pleasure. No problem.